Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Uh, so, so as mentioned, my name is Aditya Kakodkar. I work for the Worldwide Fund for Nature in Goa. We work in marine conservation. And coming 5 minutes ago, there was a guy sitting here, Sangha, who had seen the sea for the first time. And my work usually takes me in the water, so I'm in the water almost all the time. So so from a man who has seen the sea for the first time to a man who is in the water all the time. Before we start, I just want to know how many people here are below 18. Can you raise your hands? Below 18? Oh, great.
No children? Okay.
Yes.
This is a grown-up topic.
Yeah. So yeah. So whoever is below 18, so this is whatever
Don't do
we are going
drugs.
to. Yeah. So whatever we are going to discuss is a theory, but the practical part we don't advise you to try it before you are 18. Okay. Uh, so, uh, so, uh, so just to start, see what happens is there are many emotions which we feel. We feel anger, we feel peace, we feel happiness, we feel joy. But all these emotions, they are processed in our brain in a certain way. So our brain, whenever we get a stimuli from outside, our brain creates a chemical substance which is known as a neurotransmitter. Okay. So this neurotransmitter then gets activated and we feel that emotion. So there in 1992 there was a neurotransmitter which was discovered, and it was a neurotransmitter which was discovered which gave us, so which is responsible for joy and bliss and happiness. Yeah. So this neurotransmitter was aptly named, popularly named Anandamide. Okay, Anandamide by the discoverer, and it is responsible for our joy, our happiness, and we are going to talk about a plant-based substance which and its derivatives which stimulate this anandamide and cause various sensations in our body. And we are going to talk about this book, An Exploration of Cannabis in India, which is Ananda is the title of the book. And this from Karan, I learned that many of the people think that this is a very technical book, but it is not. It is a travel log of the author. So Karan goes around the country. So he starts in the foothills of Himalayas. He goes and meets the so-called descendants of the Alexander the Great. Then he goes down to the south in Kerala, then to the Red Corridor, border of Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, and then he is trying to find all these mythical strains of cannabis and what is happening about cannabis in all. What is happening about cannabis in India? Um, Also, this is a very fascinating book because I got this 3 days back and I read it in 2 days. Because Vivek gave me this book 3 days ago, and I was like a bit apprehensive, considering my work, my meetings. I was not sure that I'll be able to finish the book. But once I started reading it, it was very fascinating because it's, as I said, it's just not a travel log, but he also writes very important about very important political issues going around in India. He writes about botany of the plant. He also writes about the poorest or the poor people who have stuck in the tribal belt or who are stuck in the red corridor as we know it. So it's a very interesting book. He also writes about the current events and a little bit about the laws which are around cannabis in India. So without taking much of your time, I would now request Karan to. I welcome you to Goa. Welcome to Gulf.
Thank you.
And before we start with this book, because we have written one more book couple of years in 2022.
Yeah.
So I would like to know a little bit in a couple of minutes about that book, and it was a fiction. So
Yeah, thank you, Aditya, for that introduction, and very grateful for Gulf for having me, for Vivek for inviting me. Um, my first book was a novel. It was fiction. It was a book called A Beautiful Decay, and it is quite different from this as a subject. That book was about a hate crime upon an Indian student in the U.S. And the after effects of that hate crime. I sort of talked about the themes of othering, and I talked about the themes of somebody who's a minority in one country is a majority in a different country, and how they sort of deal with these different states sort of imposed upon them. It's a very good novel. You should check that out too. But after that, I felt it was quite a radical change for me. I thought I will continue writing novels for much longer in my life, and I still hope to. But in conversation with my editor at the Aleph Book Company, they have published both these books. My editor is the brilliant Ainla Ozukum, and she, for the longest time, was looking for someone to write a ganja book in India or a cannabis book about India. The problem is that this plant, I think almost everyone in this room would be somewhat familiar, either has been a direct user of this plant or has known someone who's a user or has some kind of idea about what this plant is, right? But there's very little written about it from an Indian perspective. Very often what ends up happening is that people either take the spiritual aspects of it and they only focus on that. They'll take the legal aspects of it and only focus on that. I wanted to do something that was very exploratory. I didn't want to go in with a preconceived notion of what this plant is, what it does, what it means to the cultures of India. I just wanted to explore it, and I wanted to do it as fairly and being as neutral as possible. And it resulted in this book, which became, it's called an exploration of cannabis in India, but it really became a self-exploration as well. I was on the road for a long time, and it ended up being one of the most personal things I've ever written. In all my travels and all the people I spoke to, a lot of it did change my life as well. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, nice. So that was my second question, which you also answered, where I was going to ask you why this non-fiction and what drew you to this very fascinating subject of cannabis. Because as I read the book, I understand that it's not an easy book to write, because you are traveling so much and traveling to dangerous areas. Because sometimes when you are in the tribal, when you are in the red corridor, the tribals might think that you are an informant of the police, and the police or the BSF might think that you are some urban Naxalite who has come to that area to pass over some information. So is there any incidents which happened during your travel which you thought it was stretching it too much, you were putting yourself too much into danger?
There is an incident I wrote about in the book. So there's a chapter called Shilavati, and Shilavati is named for the popular brand of cannabis or marijuana that grows in the Andhra Odisha borderlands, and this is what is famously known as the Red Corridor, which has heavy Maoist activity and a lot of violence between the Maoists and the border security forces. And often caught in the nexus of this, of the police authorities, the Maoists, the local mafia, are often the tribals that are caught in the nexus, and they're often used to be the people who actually cultivate the illegal cannabis, or who are used as mules to transport it. So I wanted to go to one of these tribal regions, and in Odisha, and my local journalist friend and I, we took a taxi from this town called Koraput, and we went up the Bonda Ghathi. Bonda is this extremely disenfranchised tribal group in India, one of the most disenfranchised tribal groups in India. And I was warned on the way there that my journalist friend, he works in Bhubaneswar. He didn't quite know what my project was about. He just thought I was going to do like a cultural story about the tribe. He used to go there once every few months, and they have 100 other issues more serious than even this. There's severe malnutrition, there's issues of alcoholism, there's issues of being ignored by the state government. So he would go and cover these issues. And when I told him I was there to cover the cannabis issue, even he was a little bit worried about it, because the state governments on both sides, on Andhra and Odisha, have like clamped down on it quite seriously. And of course, all the other violence that happens around this region scares people a little bit. So he told me that the border security forces might assume that I am like some kind of agent from Delhi who's coming to feed information to the Maoists. Yeah. Because I was dressed different, and I was wearing this, like I had a shirt with Chewbacca from Star Wars No, like this, there's no way I could be any kind of terror threat to anybody wearing this T-shirt, maybe except to the fictional Star Wars Empire. But but when I got up there and I conducted the interviews with the local Adivasi people and the local authorities, I got up there at an event, and you may have read about it. So this particular tribal group, they're infamous or famous for being one of the few societies in India where the women end up marrying underage boys. It's a matriarchal society in the sense that where often boys who are 14, 15-year-old marry older women who are of marriageable age, and then are supposed to take care of them as the women get older. And the local state government and UNICEF were getting involved in sort of promoting or sort of helping the local people reject child marriage. And they had this whole function there when I was around, and it was during this function where I conducted my cannabis interviews. And I was told much later as I was leaving that they organized this whole function, and they were giving small gifts to couples who were marrying at the right age. They gave gifts to couples who were marrying at age 23, 22. This whole function was organized only because I had requested to be there. So this entire sham was just put there just to say that, oh, there's a journalist from outside coming. Let's do this thing to show that we care for this particular thing. So that wasn't a dangerous time for me, but it just made me feel, this is how often things are done in India, just for the show, just to be like, I'm sure for those few couples, they made a change in their life, but do they do that all the time? Are they actively involved in helping out? I have no answers to that.
Okay. And how is the incidence of consumption of the cannabis amongst the locals, or do they only produce the cannabis, or do they also consume?
It's not a big issue for at least from my experience in my interviews and whatever data I gathered. It's not a big issue. Cannabis is not a big consumption issue in that part. They have their own local liquor that is often consumed, which is I would say a bigger issue than cannabis.
Okay. And I often read in your book that women are the most important stakeholders when it comes to taking care of the plants, the cannabis plants, day to day, then harvesting the tops of the plants, processing them. So what is the condition of women there? Or even when I read your book, it's always that the consumption of the cannabis is linked to men. So is there any consumption of cannabis linked to women, or do they consume this in the tribal belt?
I'm sure they consume it. I think especially in the regions which are disenfranchised or rural or whatever word you want to use. The farming communities across the country. I see you have the Malana page
Malana
open. So
tree.
especially in the Parvati Valley where there is a lot of cannabis growth over there too. It is often the women who are most intimately involved in the cultivation of the plant and the growing of the plant. But it is consumed by, honestly, the farmers themselves are not heavy consumers. In regions like this, they cultivate it to then sell it, and then it may be consumed by whichever gender. Then we are talking about the larger Indian public.
Yeah. So since we are in that chapter, the Malana cream, it's in the Parvati Valley. So again, the name comes from mythology, the Shiva Parvati. So why is there so much linkage of cannabis to the Hindu mythology? And I see that it's also connected because through your book, I saw that it's also connected to the Islamic mythology. But first, we'll have a look at the Hindu mythology. If you could explain to us, what is the connection?
Yeah, so this is part of the reason why the legality of cannabis is so fluid in India, that I think in 1985, the government imposed what is called the NDPS Act, the Narcotics Act, which pitted cannabis alongside all the other major drugs, opium, cocaine, LSD, everything. And there's almost a blanket ban on all of these drugs in the consumption, in the trafficking, etc. But there was, in the definition of cannabis, they defined what is known as the ganja, which is the flowering tops, what is known as charas. But they let a bhang outside of the definition, and bhang is often what the product that comes out from the leaves of the same cannabis plant. And this is directly related to bhang being mentioned in the Indian Vedas, and for a lot of mythologies that connect the god Shiva to bhang. So first of all, in the Vedas, in the Atharva Veda, which is sort of the scripture that is used to, it's the medical scripture. It's the scripture that often defines our Ayurvedic system of medicine. Bhang is among the substances that is considered to be the most important medicines in all of medicines available in nature in India. And then there's the story of Shiva's connection. So the Kumbh is going on, and do you guys know the story behind why the Kumbh takes place where it does?
No, people mind it. Yeah, please.
I'm from Varanasi. The Kumbh doesn't take place in Varanasi, but it's taking place in my next door district, Allahabad. Rest in peace to that beautiful name. There was so basically what the story goes that there was a major cosmic war called the Samudra Manthanam, and this war is between the Devas and the Asuras, the gods and the anti-gods, so to say, and they're all trying to get Amrit. Amrit is this fictional nectar of immortality, and in trying to get this Amrit out of the earth, they also release this poison called halahal. And this poison, the Amrit comes out, Garuda, the eagle god, takes the Amrit in a few pots and he flies away. But the halahal takes over whatever in the cosmos and it starts poisoning people. So Shiva, who's like the all-powerful god, he tells everybody, don't worry about it. I'll take all the halahal poison, I can handle it. And he takes it all in, and this is why Shiva's throat is blue. This is why he's called the Neelkant. Now the only thing that could help Shiva take away the stinging pain was the use of bhang. And he took some bhang and it relaxed him. Meanwhile, Garuda, who's flown away with the Amrit, he dropped 4 drops of the Amrit in 4 places around India. So it's Ujjain, it's Allahabad, it's Haridwar, and it's
Prayagraj.
Yeah, well, Prayagraj is Allahabad. Yeah. And so these 4 spots became the spots that are now the Kumbh Mela spots. So it's the mythologies of bhang and cannabis are directly related to the Kumbh. And so I was at Haridwar during the research of this in the previous Kumbh, where famously you cannot escape the very familiar smell of cannabis anywhere where there's spirituality around the Kumbh Mela.
Yeah, and the Islamic mythology, because it's very strange, because alcohol is not permitted in Islam, but there is some places, or I think in some scriptures, Islamic scriptures, it's allowed to have cannabis.
Yeah, I don't think it's permitted, but there's a Sufi saint, Al-Khidr, I think, and he was called the Green One, and it's in his honor that a lot of followers of Sufi Islam, they will consume cannabis. So it is there in their practice as well. It's not obviously as fundamental to the religious emotions that Shaivites might have or Vaishnavites might have, but among the Sufi subsect, it does exist.
Similarly, like in Gujarat, it's a dry state, but some parts, as you mentioned while we were talking some time back, that it's okay, or it's legalized in some parts.
Yeah, and I notice in a lot of dry states around India, there's heavy usage, as you might imagine, of cannabis. So
what happens? People might try it for once or twice, or then there are some people who do heavy usage of cannabis. So what are the effects of heavy usage?
The effects of heavy usage of cannabis. Yes. As someone who's never broken the law, could possibly not tell you that.
No.
But I would guess it makes one extremely sleepy and lazy and yeah.
Okay, so there is this one part of your book I would request you to read. Okay. So this I found on the frequent use of marijuana.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. I do have a serious answer to this question, and I'll quote from my own book. Frequent use of marijuana can cause. So marijuana is another word for ganja.
We should have done a glossary actually in the beginning.
Yeah. So okay, so cannabis is the plant,
Yeah.
and the same plant produces multiple things. The flowering tops of the same plant is what is in India known as ganja, or could be known as charas if it's taken out in a different way. The leaves of that plant, when rubbed together, could produce the bhang, and then the stems of that same plant is the hemp, and hemp is a massive industry for a lot of other reasons, and it all comes from the same plant. Marijuana is a slang term for ganja or cannabis when it's used recreationally. Frequent use of marijuana can cause vicissitudes in the circuits of the brain, messing with the natural production of endocannabinoids. When this happens, the endocannabinoid system can only rely on the artificial alien interference to produce a shot of bliss. Experiences that should naturally be joyful, the love of family and friends, interactions with nature and art, the rush of new adventures, the taste of your favorite foods, the euphoria of sex, may lose the usual spark. Now, a feeling of stress could replace the experience of the everyday world, unless accompanied by cannabis.
Thank you. So we talked about the different parts of the plants. So what is the illegal part, or the part which causes all the trouble? Like, which is the part?
It's the flower. The flower of the plant is what is illegal except for medicinal purposes in a few Indian states.
Okay. So that is the part, and then the leaves, each state can decide on their own, right?
Yeah, so each state can make up their own ambit on bhang. So for example, my hometown, Varanasi, bhang is legally available in government-approved bhang shops. And it's the same in a lot of areas in Orissa, in parts of Rajasthan, in Gujarat, in Madhya Pradesh. So that depends state by state.
Yeah. And also being in Goa, I think Goa considered making cannabis growing legal for medicinal use in 2020, but then they, for some reason, they did not.
Yeah.
And, even now, 98% of all the the drugs which are caught are cannabis based, cannabis or its derivatives.
Yeah, and I think a few months ago, after this book was published, there was this very hilarious story of, which I just read on the news, but maybe the Goans can tell me more about this, that there was one cannabis plant found outside a mall in Panjim. 3. Yeah, and they needed a full police force to go and capture this plant and take it out of the trouble. So,
yeah. Also in your book, funny incidents I remembered in your book. In Kollam, some people planted the cannabis plant on the World Environment Day.
In Kerala, a guy planted on World Environment Day as an ode to Mother Earth, which fair enough.
Yeah. No, because actually it does carbon sequestration, not as much as a mangrove plant.
It does. It's actually scientifically very good for the environment.
It's 22 tons per year. Per acre. So it's counted per acre. So yeah, but historically also it has been like whenever the British used to report back regarding some revolt or some mutiny, for example the 1857 mutiny. So they used to report this as Indian hemp insanity. So they used to say that this is because the soldiers are smoking too much ganja or consuming too much bhang. So something regarding that also, if you could tell us.
Yeah, so I've written a lot of the history of how bhang went from being, or bhang or ganja or whatever derivative of cannabis, how it went from being a very common thing for Indians to consume, especially in the north, to becoming this villainous capital D drug. And it has a lot to do with the colonizers, who I think they misunderstood.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't say they misunderstood. It was often seen as the poor man's drug. I think they understood the idea of coming home from a hard day's work and having your ale or your beer or your tipple and relaxing. But when the Indians did the same and relaxed with the use of cannabis, it was considered a dirtier thing for them, and it was considered a more dangerous thing for them. So they did club it with a lot of antisocial activity, and I think that influence between then followed and kind of added to the taboo of the plant in India.
Nice. In your book you mentioned 3 or 4 times I read that your life changed after your daughter was born. Um, so what are your thoughts about cannabis getting closer to the campuses of colleges, schools? Because anyways, now when she grows up, she's going to go to a school, she's going to go to a college. Me also being a parent, I also have some thoughts. But what are your thoughts regarding this, and how far, if I may ask, how much it is penetrating into the campuses of schools and colleges? Because in your book, I see that it's like readily available. It's one call away, they say.
Yeah, it is a big issue, and I do have, whatever my feelings might be about cannabis use, in general for grown-ups, I feel very strongly that we should think about it the same way as we do about any narcotic substance, whether it's alcohol or anything else. When it comes to children, I think the brains of children are still evolving. I've used the metaphor of like of clay or of Play-Doh, as they call it, where they are still not hardened yet, the brains of young people, and the heavy use of cannabis or any such substance, I think can leave a permanent imprint, and can leave the brain permanently changed long term if you're too young. So that is something that I feel that young people should at least wait till they're old enough before they even think about these decisions. But you're right, in a lot of places around the country, school campuses, it is getting more and more readily available. And I wrote a lot about in Hyderabad. There were some major issues where they were selling little balls of bhang in what were kind of like chocolate or Charminar plastic bags, and being sold as chocolate. And because it's just eaten, nobody can tell whether the child is high or not. And because it has the allure of looking like chocolate, and maybe it's mixed in chocolate, it like attracts kids too. So this is the same issue that's happening abroad too. I make the comparison with the US a lot, where a lot of young people, high school age people, are using forms of cannabis in other ways, and they're almost being sold as sweet candy or colorful little dabs, So that's one of the main issues that in the US the legislators have been fighting, to at least identify the products, because even in places where legal recreational use is now very legal in many states in America, they want to at least make that understanding that it's not attracting young people.
And is there a citizens movement or something to stop this? Are parents trying to stop this? Have you heard something about that?
I don't think there's like a nationwide citizens movement. I'm sure there are movements in city to city. I'm sure, like for example, I gave the example of Hyderabad. I'm sure there is something there that is trying to combat this. But in general, this is an illegal substance. So it's not like the parents should not be the ones having to act on this. This is somebody else's responsibility. This is the authorities' responsibility to intervene.
Yeah. Okay. So coming to the movements, there is also a movement which is known as the Great Legalization Movement, which is I suppose I read it. It's in Bangalore. It's happening in Bangalore.
It started in Bangalore. The Great Legalization.
So if you could, tell us something about the movement, who is leading it, what is its purpose, and what are they trying to achieve?
So they were started by this guy named Vicky Varora when he was in his early 20s. He must be around 30 now, and their purpose was, as it is, as it states in their name, they would like to legalize cannabis for all uses, for recreational, medicinal, and industrial use. Now, in parts of India, the cultivation is legal for medicinal and industrial use. And the GLM, the Great Legalization Movement, their argument basically is that this is a natural product. The same way there's a lot of natural things that have been used in Indian culture, through Ayurvedic history, or through our homemade medicines that a lot of Indian nannies have been doing upon their grandchildren for generations. So their argument is that they should not be denied that medicine or that tipple or that relaxation or for recreational use, whatever, because it's basically nature's gift to the people. So that is what the GLM has been fighting for. They haven't gotten very far with it, as you can imagine, but the fight goes on.
Yeah, and also to treat the take away the pain from cancer, right? Those are
Yeah. So then we're talking about more sophisticated medicinal use, which is used a lot in other countries where it is more widely available, where a cannabis-based medication is now used for a number of different ailments, and one of them is for people who are undergoing chemotherapy, and it helps with cancer pain. So they're actually they're offered cannabis-based medication.
okay. And because you spoke about the traditional medicine, there are some very large companies which deal in traditional medicine. For example, we have Baba Ramdev's Patanjali, and in your book you mentioned that they are one of the foremost proponents of legalizing cannabis for medicinal use. So something about that.
They are, and they spoke a lot about promoting cannabis to be legal, because I think they want to use it in their medicinal products. But I think Patanjali has way bigger legal problems right now than cannabis.
Great. Yeah. So, any part of the book you would like to read?
Sure. How much time do we have?
We have 10 more minutes, 5 more minutes, then we'll open the floor.
Okay. So I'll do a little reading from the book just to give an idea of like how the narrative is. This is not a very academic book. This is written from a personal experience. I am primarily, as I started off by saying, I'm more of a storyteller, and I like to tell things in larger narratives in this way. So I'll read from the part where I went to the Parvati Valley, and the Parvati Valley is famous for the Malana cream, for all these, for like what is famously known as some of the best hashish in the world.
Yeah.
It comes from
Yeah, and also see Malana cream. So they have each strand of cannabis has a different name. So if you go to the Parvati Valley in Himachal Pradesh, it's Malana cream. If you go to Kerala, there is a strain called Idukki Gold. Then Silavati, as we discussed in the Red Corridor. Then there's also Mysore mango, there is Shillong mango, there's Kashmir ice, so different names, So
Yeah.
Malana cream is Himachal Pradesh.
So the backstory to this is that I was going on a hike in this area called Khiriganga, which maybe some of you have been there, in the Parvati Valley, and the bus broke down, so I had to walk. And basically, the bus broke down on the way to the hike was supposed to begin, so I was basically walking the highway, and I was really annoyed. So here we go. My trip to Parvati Valley was supposed to be just a short 4-day getaway, and I was determined to make the journey feel random, spontaneous, to allow myself the freedom to sway and change, to drift wherever the wind leads me. And yet, now I yearned suddenly for some predictability, to hitch a ride, to get to Barshaini on time, to bring some order to the randomness. Finally, I hear a rumbling sound getting louder, closer. From around the corner behind me, I see a white Jeep taxi plowing up the highway. I stick my hand out to get the driver's attention, and the vehicle slows to a halt. There are men and women packed in the passenger seating in the back of the Jeep, 8 or 9 of them. One young man sits alone on the rooftop. Where to? The driver asks. Varshini. 100 rupees, says the driver, but there's no space in the back. Rooftop, I ask. Dekho, that is up to you, okay? But if someone stops us, it's your problem. I shrug. Sure. I climb the ladder to the back of the roof rack. The man already seated here nods, and I nod back. He seems to be in his mid-20s, resting in a reclined, confident posture of I couldn't possibly give less of a damn about the world. I cross my legs and sit, feeling the cylindrical metal bars under my butt. I feel a cool mountain breeze as soon as the Jeep stutters to a start. An immediate relief under the mid-morning sun. I have triumphed against chaos. I would start the trek on time, and as a bonus, enjoy the slight thrill of this little crime, seated on the roof of a moving vehicle. Lighter hai? The man beside me asks. With the flick of his thumb, he makes the universal sign of igniting a light. Smoke up, he says. The up direction offering a clear distinction from the tobacco-only act of simply smoking a cigarette or a bidi. Ha, I answered him, and offer a small gas lighter out of my backpack. He, in turn, fishes out his own ingredients, including a sticky black ball of charas between his thumb and index fingertips. There's rolling paper and a cigarette from which to sprinkle some tobacco as a mixer. When it's ready, he puts the joint to his mouth, lights it, covering the flame with his other hand to shield it from the wind gushing by us. He puffs in aggressively to ensure the burn sticks. After a couple of tries, it does. I know what will happen next. An exhilarating rush to his head, a thump on his forehead that first jolts him, and then in the quick instant that follows, relaxation. His eyes droop and cheeks feel heavier. He smiles at nothing, a smile that tells me that he has found that brief shot of bliss. Blood cells in his head seem to evaporate up to the clouds, floating up past the layer of meninges that wrap around his brain. He takes another puff, inhales it deeper into his lungs, and exhales slowly. Like a Trojan horse, the THC in cannabis mimics the anandamide to give our brain more of the same thing it already has. The substance has often been described as a duplicate key to unlock the body's anandamide receptors. It's a cheat code of sorts, a shortcut to exhilaration.
Thank you. And also, in the Malana cream, the Malana area, the cannabis started, the people started selling and growing it in 1980s when an Italian traveler showed them how to harvest the resin or the what do you call it?
It was always there. Like this plant is indigenous to the region, but I think they were travelers who came from the outside who kind of figured out how to then repackage it for sale for recreational use, because initially a lot of the local village communities, they used it for medication. They used the hemp as rope to tie the animals. There's people I met who, if they got a bee sting, they would use a little bit of cannabis and rub it on that, and allegedly it helps. So yeah, there's a lot of this stuff happens in the villages.
Great. So now we'll take a few quick questions. If anybody has any questions. Right.
Hello. Yeah, I have two questions. First is you read about the legalization part, but I would like to know what are your thoughts of, is there any benefit to legalizing cannabis? And the second question is about things like CBD oil and which are freely available in India. So if CBD oil is available, there seems to be a legalization of a fair amount of cultivation.
Yeah, so when we speak of legalization of cannabis, we are speaking of three different stages. There's the industrial use, there's the medicinal use, and then there's the recreational use. Now, of course, technically it's all industry because but when we say industrial use, what they mean is to use in t-shirts as cotton or hemp seeds or biomass fuel. Like there's umpteen uses for hemp, and India's kind of falling behind in this. There's a lot of countries that have raced ahead. China, for example, which has some very strict laws about recreation use of cannabis, they also have two districts which have the most massive hemp farms in the world. Canada, which is among the countries where it has some of the most progressive laws of all forms of cannabis, recreation, medicine, etc. There's more cannabis that grows in Uttarakhand than all of Canada. So this is a raw material that we are very rich in, and I feel we are underusing it. So my opinion is that yes, I think there should be controlled legalization of cannabis, and even for recreation, but controlled. I don't consider it to be that much worse than alcohol, and a lot of people who have probably dabbled in both might agree with me in this. I think there's less danger to self and others. I almost feel that it should have the same common sense we apply upon alcohol. Don't give it to kids. Don't if you don't drink and drive, don't use cannabis and drive. Things like that, and make it difficult. Don't advertise the same way that you advertise other substances. So controlled legalization, I think should be allowed. Coming back to the CBD thing, because medicinal cultivation for medicinal purposes is legal now in Uttarakhand and most recently in Himachal Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh also, in some parts. This is where a lot of the CBD is coming from. It is the same plant. This is why I wrote a whole book about this. Like the same plant has so many complexities about some parts being absolutely illegal and some parts being given to somebody who can't go to sleep and they'll take some CBD, it's the same thing. And CBD is now pretty widely available, I think, around India too. So yeah, that's just one of the early steps, I think, to further liberalization, I feel.
Okay. Any more questions?
Hi.
We'll come back to you. We'll come. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Do you talk in your book about any cultural aspect of cannabis use in terms of a community building, an act or something? Because when you just read out the paragraph, when you said that you knew what was going to happen next, I thought you were going to say that the guy will pass it on to you and then you will take a hit or something, right? But then you went on to explain what is going to happen to him internally, and concluded by saying that it's a shortcut to inspiration or something. So my idea of also that it's a community building act or something like that. So it always gets passed around. Like, yeah. So you talk about it in the book.
It can be a community building, and so one of the most fun journeys during the research for this book is when I went to Manipur. And Manipur has this community called the Sajjal or the UFO. I don't know if anyone's familiar with them. And they, again, I'm making a wild generalization, but I joked that they reminded me of like the Rastafarian community, but based in Manipur. And they are really into their form of martial arts. It's called Thangta. It's an aggressive martial arts. And they're really into smoking the cannabis together. And so they hang out in their little like shanglens, which are these like temples, but not exactly temples, because they also have a martial arts room there, and they build a fire, and they play guitar, and they'll smoke their local ganja together. And it's a very close community feel. They have their hidden secrets that they will not tell me. This, they told me they're not a cult. They're very strong about that. I'm like, that sounds like very cultish to say. But again, like a very positive community feel in areas like that, because it helped bring a lot of different people together from all walks of life. They're very open to saying that almost anyone from any profession is allowed to come sit with them and smoke with them, as long as they as long as they adhere to the rules of the community.
Yeah. Also, in your book, I read during the Kumbh Mela, the chillum gets passed on to the left. Whoever is to the left, they give it, and then continues like that. So that's so we'll go at the back. There were 2 questions, 2 hands raised there.
Good afternoon. As you mentioned about Mahakumbh, so why the Mahakumbh is coming after 144 years?
I
haven't answered. I don't think he has.
Outside the ambit of my knowledge, but it's got something to do with astronomy, or astrology. That I don't know. Someone else must have a better answer than this. Here.
Astronomy or Jupiter?
Yeah, the Jupiter is facing somewhere else. He was somewhere else 12 years ago.
12,
Yeah. Every 144 years. And also, I think there's debate about whether this is if it actually does happen every 144 years. There's some debate about that.
Okay. So finally, so any more questions? Yeah.
I have a very off question. So,
Thank you. In reading about the legalization and illegalization, it was interesting to me to see that in countries like the United States, marijuana pot was considered something that the black people and Latino people did, and alcohol was something that civilized white people did. And this is some attitude that the British also had, that a gin and tonic is fine and a joint is beneath. In the current Indian consciousness, where we don't have that sort of racial division, why the demonization of marijuana, do you think, when some things like alcohol, tobacco, etc. might have a more exalted, more accepted sort of thing?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wrote about that too. Like it was the influence of American racism actually that defined the cannabis laws all over the world. They used to say that it was the black people. They used to say it was the Mexican immigrants, the Filipinos, who were all the users of marijuana. They used to say, and they made these movies scaring people into thinking this is a terrible drug, and and they held this big conference in the 1960s that then enforced their laws upon the rest of the world, including India. And it's so ironic now that it's the Americans who have now somewhat liberalized, I would say, half the states. In half the states, you can still get jailed for holding a little bit of marijuana, but have liberalized quite a bit. India, we still work on Indian Standard Time. We are going slowly. We're going to first make sure and see how everyone else in the world does. It's also part of a colonial hangover. I think we are sort of still stuck in those old, a borrowed sense of orthodoxy that we didn't have, that we have now for some reason, that continues to make it a taboo. It's almost as if we are ashamed of something that was indigenously. You know what I'm saying? That was ours.
Because India resisted the illegalization in the United Nations.
Yeah, India resisted. Yeah.
Yeah, because they were the one people who stood when the US wanted to make it illegal everywhere or something like that.
Three countries resisted: India, Pakistan, and Burma, Myanmar, and and for 24 years India resisted, and and now we are back to.
But now we seem to be more conservative than a lot of others when it comes to that.
We are compared to Asia. Asia in general is very conservative when it comes to the laws of cannabis. Thailand, as you may have recently read, is one major exception. So India is actually, for the continent, India is pretty liberal, because even though the laws are stringent, they're not imposed as stringently unless the police want to make an example out of you, like they did with Shah Rukh Khan's son, like they did with Riya Chakrabarti, what happened after Sushant Singh Rajput.
Yeah,
so issues like that, they can make an example out of you, but in general, I think, at least in the north, time out, okay?
Last question.
It's just about Ananda. So if you want to sum up your book as Ananda, how would it?
Thank you for asking that, because I wish I had mentioned that earlier. Even though this is a book, the subtitle has the word cannabis in it. For me, it became a book about joy, Ananda, bliss. I sort of stuck to that motif really closely. I found joy in my travels. I found joy in my family and my friends. I found a lot of joy in just asking myself the questions of why I was a certain way and allowing myself to grow. There was joy in that. So it became a book about just the general idea of bliss beyond the artificial bliss that is created by cannabis.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well,
I think
And,
we all enjoyed this
no,
afternoon session.
no, we are not finished.
Oh,
This-
yeah,
This
no.
last
Okay,
thing.
he wants to have the last word.
Yeah. So a wise man once said, so if the whole world smoked a joint simultaneously, so it is, if the whole world smoked a joint simultaneously, there would be world peace for at least 2 hours, followed by a global food shortage. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, President.
Thank you.
Sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Aditya, and thank you.
Also.